Hey guys, it's Doa. You may think to yourself, hey, Doa's too nice to be on Thorin's channel. Why is he there? And you're right. He's locked me in his closet, and I'm being forced to record this. Help.
Even though EU LCS, when it began, was itself an experimental project, it certainly was not at the scale it is now, although actually the viewership was pretty good compared to now, to be fair. Just showing that out there.
Yeah.
Little shot across the bow there, it's all good. Right, I will say, at the time, no one even knew, is this going to be the thing? As you said, people thought maybe it's the open circuit again, or maybe they do this initially and then they sort of introduce other tournaments. Obviously, kept IEM going, etc. So no one was really sure, but I can tell you one of the main things, and one of the main reasons people wanted to do this gig was it's a real paid gig, it's a salaried gig, You're actually a pro at this point in time. Not many people, I mean, how many people even did commentary for this? You, Joe, was there even more than 3? Was there 4?
No, there was 4 of us. It was
Right.
4 of us. It was 4 of us. So 4 commentary and sjokz. So it would have been 5 for the on-air team. That was in 2013 and 14. And for me, like, I landed a cushy gig, right? I went from doing 9 months of, let's say, freelance work, right? Where I fell into pretty big gigs. By this point, I think Joe has been commentating for more than a decade, if memory serves. I mean, it's going to be close to that, right? By 2013, I think he's in his mid-20s, you know? And Deman has already been in the scene and involved for 10 to 15 years himself. So not only is it a cushy gig, right? Not only is it consistent, also we were hired as full-time, unlimited contract employees, which is very important in Germany and will be part of my story later on. But like, it's a full-time thing. It's not salary. It's not freelance. It's not gig work. It's a full-time job. You come in, you do your story preps, you write content, we do rehearsals, and then you do 3 days of shows. And they had a good mixture of Deman and Joe with more experience than the rest of that entire production building combined, and 2 hungry young on-air talent in myself and sjokz, and then Jason Kaplan, who's been kind of in between, right? So you got 2 veterans, 2 newbies, and one guy who's kind of filling the void. And it was a special time, interesting time. It was also a bit of a shit time, just to be fair, because it was a science experiment for a while, and it took a couple of years before the EU LCS found its feet, found its own studio, found its own team, and then eventually a few more years before it became the LEC.
To give people another sense of the era we're talking about, I'll tell a very brief story. So you're talking now about early 2013 when the EU LCS began. In early 2012, I actually used to be the editor-in-chief of SK Gaming, one of the main websites. It was obviously a big team at the time. And I ended up leaving in May. And I think something around March or something, because we were trying to expand the team out, we actually went from having like a tiny crew of, say, like 4 or 5 people, you know, like 1 person per game, to like what we'll do is we'll just get a bunch of like sort of intern people and we'll see who's good. And then in the process of like testing them out on basic news posts, one day, one of them will get through, one of them will be replaced. One of them turned out to be someone from Belgium. She was called sjokz. And she was just someone who applied to be like, you know, assistant League of Legends news post or something. It was like, okay. And what happened was I did a little, one of those like weekly TeamSpeak meetings with all your crew, because I was the editor-in-chief. And I had all the newbies in there and I told them all, right, something that only one person responded to. You can see where the story's going. I said at the end of the call, by the way, yeah, obviously most of you are here to just get assigned a news post and we'll check if it's done right and I'll tell you the protocols. But if for some reason one of you has sort of like a bit of a creative outlet, like maybe you want to do an interview with someone and I could maybe hook you up with that person to do the interview, or maybe you have an idea for an article. I said, basically reach out to me. You can do it privately. Don't have to say it now in front of everyone, and just tell me, like, is there something you'd want to do? And so this girl, I barely know her. I wasn't even the one who picked her to join. She just messages me, and listen to what she said, Trevor. She goes, even though, by the way, she was really shy on the call and in the chat, she goes, I actually really think like I could be good on camera. And I was like, okay, we could probably, I tell you what, let's put together like a little show. And she ended up doing a show. It was like an SK show where she like presented the news. And then she had a similar rise to you. It was actually quite a similar time frame. She got picked up to like, she was doing interviews and she was going to America. And then and similarly, she got, even though now everyone's going to look back and go, oh, the legends got hired. It's like, no, Joe and Deman were legends. You guys were like, that's a gamble. It's a gamble there. So
I'll tell you this.
Go on.
I actually have a bee in my bonnet, a little chip on my shoulder. She beat me by about 6 months because of the SK gig. sjokz actually got to attend and do coverage in 2012 internationally. So yes, I got MLG and Dreamhack, but she got to do Worlds, and in my book, that's bigger and better. So she beat me to the circuit by about 3 months. But we then grew up together. I mean, like, we were both wet behind the ears.
Yeah, so I want to know, what's young Sjokz like? This is when she's like 25, 26, by the way, guys.
You know what? Her and I have landed in a really good place. So I want to make it clear that what I'm about to share is not something crazy, but we did not like each other at all. Okay. We had different problems. I was overly confident, overly confrontational, overly blunt and direct, and also, inexperienced and frankly dumb in some places. She was uncomfortable, a little bit nervous, had imposter syndrome, but also she knew her shit, so she had knowledge. So we just clashed, right?
Right.
She would be the smart, quiet one in the room, and I would be the loud, dumb one, and we'd butt heads. Right. And when she would say the smart things that made my confidence, shrink, it made me feel bad. And then when I would force, conversations to take things that made her uncomfortable, like, we really clashed, like really, really clashed. 2013, 2014, things were just, we agreed to walk parallel to one another, and we didn't necessarily engage. But 2015, when we moved to Berlin and then started to settle down, and then more importantly, when we started to own our roles, right? When Ifya and Sjokz became the host and she wasn't just the interview anymore. When I got moved to play-by-play, once we got experience, once we grew, and very importantly, I think, once we had carved out our corner of the show and we had carved out our thing, and we became comfortable with our voices and with our performances and with our roles, we really started to bond. And over the years, I'm really, really happy to see just how much she's grown, and specifically breaking into other games, using her languages. I've never met another person who's as linguistically capable as she is. And if you watches this, I just wish you use your languages even more. I think you can do more, because it's insane to be able to pick up and speak languages the way she does.
She'll go and do interviews in like German and Spanish. It's insane, isn't it?
Yes. But also, again, when we traveled together, we got to see literally the whole fucking world over 10 years. And she would be in a country for 4 to 5 weeks and start speaking the local language. It didn't matter where.
Right.
Like, that's it. Yeah, it's something that needs to be applauded. Something needs to be celebrated, because and also something I'm jealous of. But
sure.
It was another thing that, like, early on we didn't quite gel, and I also think it's very important to acknowledge as well. I think early on, especially 2013, I still think that the esports, the League of Legends esports broadcasting show was still kind of like an old boys club, and it took a little bit of time to shed that. I think it was still kind of like, almost like FPS macho energy, despite the fact the game and the community wasn't that. And as European broadcast began to kind of find its corner, find its niche, that kind of bravado started to shed, I think, and we became a bit more nerdy, maybe a lot more nerdy as the years went on.
What I like is, even though some parts are planned and there's a method to the madness, it does also seem like in your career, sometimes you do just sort of trip over and it's like, holy shit, what happened here? And so, like, again, you're just doing this first year. Whereas you say, you're sort of like the background dancer to Joe and Deman. Go Joe. And then somehow you work in Worlds. Working Worlds in season 3, that's pretty nuts.
Now, at
the Staples Center Pro.
That's the public perspective. But what's happening behind the scenes is I'm dancing like a monkey. What happens behind the scenes is I'm speaking to every producer. I'm speaking to every director. I'm ensuring that my managers, I know what's their vision for the tone of the broadcast.
Right.
Okay, how do we define what the North Star is? What is it that determines what's a good broadcast? So I'm trying to soak up as much information as possible. And crucially, I then want to act that out, right? When we fast forward to that World Championship and I'm hosting the analyst desk, number one, I can't do play-by-play because I'm not Joe, Deman, or Rivington. So I'm out. I can't do color commentary because I'm not Jats or Kobe, or Deficio was joining us. I think Prolly was even doing some guest bits. MonteCristo was out there. Crepo was doing stuff for us too. So I'm not in their league. Where can I find my niche? Now, before Worlds and hosting the desk happens, I'm in January or February of 2013. I know what the schedule looks like. I know we've got these events coming up. I know I'm not going to compete with these guys. So how do I get myself in the show? And that means I need to be the middleman. I need to be the coordinator. I need to demonstrate to everybody that I can be a host off air so that they will trust me to be a host on air. And I magically appear as the host for World Final, but that was a goal that I'd set in February or March, sitting in Cologne in a studio, because I sit next to the guys who are going to cast the World Final. Right.
Yeah.
And I know you have to earn it. You know, you don't just make it in unless you are a fucking Caps or a Perks or a Reckless, or, you know, you are not the 0.001% that gets a World Final in your first year. And I know that I'm not. So I'm going to work up to it. And that's why I made sure that I would develop skills, develop communication ability, crucially as well, develop a language that when the Riot Games managers and producers say they want something, I can turn to Deman and Joe and be the vessel for that level of communication. I did not mind taking on that burden. And as we all know, there are some challenges sometimes translating corporate gobbledygook to broadcast. But I had a bit of a knack for it. And importantly, I had a desire. You know, I wanted to be on the shows. I wanted to be in those stadiums. I wanted to be on the most legendary World's Analyst desks of all time. And when I think back to the Double Lift, Monty, Freak Crepo desks, I get a giant smile on my face because I worked really hard to secure that host seat.
Yeah, that's actually a gem, by the way, for people who don't know. Like, that's something most talent would never do. Like, you just sit in the green room, you comment. I did the same thing. I've never talked to a bloody producer. So the joke is, I have no idea why they thought I was good at one point in time. I was the best, or I was a nobody, or they did it, they didn't. I just thought it did or it didn't happen. Yeah.
Can I tell you two stories?
Go on.
Okay, so there's two sides to it, right? Because I know I'm not the most intelligent at the game, right? In order for me to be good at my job, in order for me to set up, like, one of the things that I'm kind of most famous for is, like, I ask such great questions. I set up my co-casters so well. Yeah, because I do my fucking research. I do a lot of research. I have this insanely fond memory, and it's with Monty again, where this might have been Worlds 2014. Worlds 2014, I think it was. We were doing some prep. We were pre-tournament looking at the patch changes coming in. And I vividly remember a big debate around Janna. And I think, if memory serves, Freak was saying something like Janna's going to be super OP, Janna's going to be the most important pick. And Monty was not as convinced, right? So they were having a healthy debate, healthy discussion. I listen, I'm paying attention, I note this down. Fast forward 2.5 weeks. We're live on broadcast. I see this moment come out. I have both Freak and Monty on the desk with me. And I remember Monty being a little bit like, hey, I'm not so sure. And I put words in his mouth. And I'm like, okay, well, listen, we got this post game. And I vividly remember, Monty, we were debating this. And you sat there and you told me that this was going to be awful. This was never going to be good. And I just kept piling on way stronger than he was. Because I know Monty. I know he's a performer. And I know that he knows. If I give him this prompt and I give him the setup, he's going to give me the performative thing because I'm non-verbally communicating what my intent is. And he gave me the biggest explosion. I never said that. Don't put words into my mouth. That doesn't happen unless you put the work in and crucially, you have to be cognizant of it. Secondly, I get into trouble because I try to produce my own segments. Right. I have been told off on more than one occasion by producers outside of the European region that you do not tell my producers what to do. I'm like, all I did was ask for a single cam. I'm like, hey, when we come back from this ad break, I've got this idea. Give me a camera on one. And some broadcasts don't like that from their talent. They like them to dance like monkeys when told to.
When this scenario happened, that Joe and D-Man left, and if people don't know, the reason why, it's not even something worth getting into, it's part of it's like outside of the server stuff, it's basically just actually, it happenstance. And at the time, listen, this is aged badly, but no one knew League would be the massive game for 10 years. So
Correct.
If you're someone like D-Man, by the way, what he did, stayed in Cologne and got a gig with ESL where he was going to cast other games. If you're him, you'd think I can go to any game and I'm D-Man, it's going to be the best, right? When this happens, I can tell you right now, if you know the way esports is, that's like you're continuing the Beatles without fucking Paul McCartney and John Lennon, mate. It's like, what? Why even continue? Like, I think a lot of people thought this broadcast was going to fall its arse, mate. Like, you've just lost the stars. What were you thinking when you had to go forward? Because you're the main guy at that point.
So, honestly scared because we didn't know if League of Legends in Europe could survive without Joe and Lee. They were the biggest commentators in League of Legends, and they had been for 3 or 4 years. And then I think Joe, more so than Deman, Joe was probably one of the most respected voices in all of broadcast, right? And unless you've really grown up with it, unless you were watching or paying attention from 2005 to 2010, even 2000 to 2010, I cannot stress just how impressive Joe's career was, right? So we were terrified. What was even more scary is that the studio was moving, the entire team was moving. For 2013, everything was run by ESL. For 2014, let's say 75% was run by ESL, and there was like 25% staff Germany from Riot Berlin or Riot Germany at the time. When we moved to Berlin, it was going to be an entirely new production partner, entirely new production team, entirely new leadership. So not only did we lose Joe and Deman, but like everything behind the scenes was changing, and we had no confidence. Oh, and on top of that, you've got the now retired, like really unsuccessful shit professional player Deficio. Like seriously, if you go back to 2015, his net like market value was not good. He had a couple of good picks and bans at a world championship on
Yes,
Analyst.
that's it.
Well done. That's your fucking job, but you suck at this game. That's okay. That's not fair. He's still a pro, and he definitely kicked the shit out of me. But he's going to be your lead color caster.
Yeah, he doesn't have the status, right?
Right, and me and some American kid named Pyra, right? Like, so we were very nervous. And also, let me not forget, sjokz was obviously coming with us as well. And sjokz had begun owning the analyst desk. And by this point, had become sort of the de facto host. What I will say was, despite the concerns, we again knew that 2015 was going to be a growing year. 2015 was going to be a developmental year. I was landing in my play-by-play for the very first time. We have a new production partner. sjokz is owning the analyst desk. And again, we got like a free pass. Like, I mean, if you actually think about it, the company, the managers, the bosses, well, we're moving, it's Berlin, we've lost the superstars. Let's just see what these kids can do. There wasn't that pressure that you feel now. You know, there wasn't that stress that, hey, viewership numbers are down. Fucking co-streamers are killing the main broadcast. Like, there was no threats. Money was flowing, and the community, well, okay, up until this point, the community is still pretty toxic and pretty vicious. I think the EU fan base became nicer over time, and then is now on a downward swing, I think. They started really brutal. LEC kind of swayed them, turned them a little bit cringe for a little bit, and now we're kind of splintering. But yeah, I think it was stressful, but kind of hopeful because we knew we have time.
Right, people will know, as you said, it is actually iconic, you and Deficio. And actually, you both sort of grew into your roles. And then the joke of it is, by the time he actually left to be like, you know, general manager of teams and stuff, he actually was kind of considered like the mega mind of fucking league. And he had all the picks and the angles, and everyone thought he was super smart. You'd both earned your status. You were the main guy on the broadcast. How did you feel that developed? Was the connection early? Did you have to build anything? What was it like?
We had to build a trust. Because he didn't fully trust my leadership and my gut instincts for broadcast. And I would say things so definitively like, this is the way I want to do picks and bans, or this is the story I want to follow. This is the narrative I want to introduce. This is my direction. And I needed to show him and demonstrate to him why those things could be good. I also didn't know how to get information out of him. And he, frankly, I mean, Martin never learned to be succinct, but I have never met another broadcaster that worked as hard as he did when he was competing. To a fault, and also just to be fair, he never learned the idea of working smarter, not harder. Martin is the definition of a grinder. And he watched hours and hours and hours of VODs to his own detriment at times. But there is a reason that I feel confidently 9 out of 10 professionals, 9 out of 10 pro players that you ask who was the most knowledgeable color caster to have ever been on broadcast, I believe Deficio's name will be up there. I truly believe that he's in the argument. What I think we got lucky that our senses of humor clicked, and that as that trust developed, my slightly more sensible thinking and his slightly more naughty Danish thinking ended up being a really good complement. I'm not a funny guy, but I can facilitate fun. Martin was the funny guy, and I just happened to be able to create a nice playground for it to happen naturally. So we got really lucky, but again, we also we focused on our craft. I never studied the game because he would teach me, and he never thought about the broadcast because I handled the broadcast. Right. And it was just a complete trust fall. I knew my role, he knew his role, and it ended up working really well.
Even though it'll sound ridiculous to say, when I actually became broadcast talent in Counter-Strike, I did think I was coming to be the guy who's watched every demo, like Deficio, like saying, the nerd who knows every detail. I'm going to tell you every piece of trivia on the team. So what I had to quickly learn was, you can do that, but the problem is the guy at home, he can maybe go, okay, I think that's right, but he doesn't know. He's not impressed because he doesn't know that that's amazing. You're doing something. It's like a dog watching a card trick. It's like he's doing something that shit looks hot. But so what I'll say is this: obviously, then I had to develop a lot of like persona on camera stuff. And so one thing I never appreciate, I've actually told you this before. I think I might have even tweeted it. I never actually appreciated you, Quickshot, because I just saw someone like you're saying who was like, oh, he's fucking got a massive loud mouth. He's all over the camera. It looks like he's fucking. What was he doing backstage? Fucking hell, he's all over. His energy's crazy. But like you say, some of the stuff he says is bollocks. Like, what does he say? That's not right. That's nonsense. And so what I had to learn over time was, and I always say this to people now in Counter-Strike, I always say one of the downsides of our game with how many fucking matches there are and how intricate it is and how much information burden there is, you have a really hard time actually remembering for broadcast talent something awesome in the game. I'll give you an example. In Counter-Strike, Yanko was our Deficio, right? And he might have given a million great analyses, but I would challenge anyone, including Yanko. What was your most famous point you ever made? What was a great like map call out? I'm sorry, I've got a great memory. No one remembers them. He was doing a great job. He was 10 out of 10. But I'll tell you what, if you watched Counter-Strike, do you remember when I got a fucking baguette and smashed it off?
Yes.
Do you remember when I went, hey, Shaq, you're basically fat, mate? Like, what the fuck? So similarly, right, if someone thinks back now, Deficio and Quickshot, they're going to see people slapping people's asses. They're going to see constantly going on about him failing to qualify.
Yes.
I think you guys embodied the entertainment factor. You've brought something in that sense, right?
And the slightly the comfort in pissing people off. I know I'm a lot. I know I'm a lot. Right. I know I'm overwhelming. But find me another broadcast talent outside of Action Slacks. I think Action Slacks in Dota 2 is my spirit animal.
Right.
But I mean it sincerely. Like when I go back to the early 2010s, how many people were as over the top as I am? How many people were brave enough to say dumb shit on broadcast? I had 2 years of saying dumb shit. I had to do it. So, yes, we embodied the fun. We embodied comfortable being a bit nerdy, comfortable being a little bit cringe, comfortable with the bromance. I mean, listen, one of my favorite memories, Martin and I began our broadcast relationship in 2015. I happened to start dating my now wife in 2014. Now, we didn't go public with all that for many years. But when I got engaged in 2016, most of my comments were saying, how can you cheat on Deficio, right? It was my most liked post. It was my most, and most of the stuff was like, the relationship say, that's strange. That's parasocial.
It is.
But it also was a huge compliment in some ways to be like, hey, listen, that's how much our connection and our bond or our fun actually does bleed through. And that, hey, we didn't get fired for some of that shit.
Sure. That's what I want to ask you about. Awesome. Let me spin into that. Because actually what people won't know, and I will give full credit to my friend MonteCristo for this, is when people do shit like that, this isn't Counter-Strike, mate. I grew up in Counter-Strike where luckily I just got away with that. And they were like, hey, fucking straight, this is great, mate. Yeah, keep going. You're going to get a Twitch clip off that. I've heard in League, mate, like, it's one of those ones where for a moment like that, listen, mate, you ask for forgiveness, not permission. You're never going to tell a producer I'm going to do that. So some of the stuff you're doing, like slapping asses, I can't imagine that's what Riot Global had in mind for the broadcast, Trevor. Like, was there ever any pushback? Was it ever walking a line?
Yes. I'll put it this way. For me personally, and speaking very much from my own experience, I always had a policy that I would only spend when I have good credit, okay? And it brings me so much joy to hear you say the exact words that I would tell talent that I eventually hired and trained, things like that. sometimes you don't ask for permission, you have to ask for forgiveness, but only when you know you can get away with it, right? It can't be too much. You need to make sure you got good reasons. I've been told off many occasions. Was any of it super serious? Was any of it super scary? No, I don't think I would go that far. But that's also because I would have one butt slap that would require a, come on, Trev, like, you should know better. And then I could turn around and go, yeah, but have you seen the numbers on this? And then I kind of win the argument because we're producing an entertainment product that needs numbers. But I still got the slap on the wrist. So we worked for an American corporate company that's very much Silicon Valley, that very much had American sensibilities when it comes to broadcast. And it was always a bigger issue around international events and worlds, or like, international events and collab times. But within Germany, within Berlin, within the multi-European team, I very, very rarely got told off. What actually was even funnier is that because I would do this so often, it actually is a Trevor moment.
Oh, right.
That I would go backstage and my team would go, for fuck's sakes, Trevor, do you have to do that again? And they're like, you're the only one that can get away with it. Or like,
right.
Why are you the only one that can do this shit? So I would ironically kind of get more grief from my actual immediate colleagues and commentators than I would from the managers, at least with the exception of international.
Because the LEC has grown, become its own entity, and quite frankly, it has superseded. Spoiler, there isn't even an LCS. It's called LTA now. We win. That's it. The end of the battle. That's surrender. You had to join with South America. It's over. That's crazy. If I want to take people back, the NA broadcast was so much bigger, bro. If CLG played TSM in a regular season game, that bigger than our finals, and we could have had like Moscow 5 against fucking, we could have had like a way better team. It didn't matter. And I know at the time, by the way, in the industry, actually LEC was seen as like the dumping ground. Like, look, if you want a gig, you could maybe go to like EU LCS. They might give you a shot there. They don't really have to. That was people. Monty were being told that. Pappy Smith were being told for a scoring. But everyone else wanted the promotion to the NA broadcast. They wanted what pasty time. Yeah, I wanted to know. Did you ever want to go there? Did you want to be over on NA LCS?
I did. 2013, 2014, as I mentioned, I was doing color. Had to because of Joan Deman. We knew the studio was going to be moving in 2015. And I did not know that it was going to be without Joan Deman. Obviously, we're not talking about that, right? Like, we don't even know where the city's going to be. We don't know what's going to be happening. In 2011 and 2012, I had lived in Berlin. And I had fallen in love with Berlin. And after I started doing these things, like I explored the city, explored the nightlife. The clubbing scene here is insane. The summers are amazing and whatnot. So in 2014... I started the process of getting my L1 visa, which is an intercompany visa from Germany to America. In August, I get my visa. I'm working Gamescom, by the way, and I'm like crying my eyes out working Gamescom on stage because it's over my birthday and it's like super exciting. I'm a South African working Gamescom for the second time. I have my visa, and at Gamescom, the manager's like, look, can you give us a couple of weeks because we need to tell you that we're moving next year and we want to give you the choice. Before they could even tell me all the details, before they could even tell me that, they just said, look, so we are going to Berlin. And I went, I'm done. I'm going to stay. And said, yeah, but we don't know, like, what's going on. Like, we can't promise you play-by-play. And I said, I'm not going to LA. Fuck LA. I don't like the city. I cannot stand living there. I'm happy to travel, but don't like the people, don't like the place, don't like the vibe. I lived in Berlin, so I picked Berlin. But had they not moved to Berlin, had they gone to a different city, had it been a different host, I would have been in LA in 2015, and it would have been Rivington and Quickshot and Kobe and Jets. And I don't know where my life would have been. At the time, I told Rebecca that, if I end up moving, like we started seeing each other under the auspices that I'm leaving at the end of the year.
Oh, wow, right.
Like, that was just a fact, because at the time, job came first. So, yes.
And again, 10 plus years later, still going.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So yes, I 100% wanted that. But it's also, the things were completely different, right? Like the investment, the capital, the staffing, the broadcast facilities, the studio, everything was just better in NA. It was a lot closer. EU was run out of a satellite office with, third parties, and slowly over time, they gained more control. And that's really from where my real development, my real growth, and my real impact comes from like 2015 onwards, when I start to become a leader, start to become a mentor. I actually became the manager, and start to leave sort of like my mark on the European League broadcast.
The perception in broadcast work in League is if you aren't on the NA broadcast, which is supposed to just be the NA broadcast, but it's the flagship, it's the home broadcast, where they began, we all know that. The perception is like it's hard to get into the international events. You're not certain that you're not Kobe, these people, it's a guarantee they must have booked the ticket already. I've noticed you and sjokz, and then it would be depending on who was doing best at the analyst, you were all showing, you were getting in every single year for Worlds. Like, was this actually, was it ever touch and go as to whether you get these gigs? Was it actually, did you have just like, was the path lined for you to go there?
I mean, it's no, it was never really touch and go. Like, just to be brutally honest, is that as the, let's say, the backbones and the foundations and kind of the faces of EU, myself and sjokz were the brand, right? And Martin was for a time, but Deficio left, so it was me and Ifya over the 10 years, last 9 or 10 years. So whenever we came to the international events, because both sjokz and I were really good collaborators off camera, and we contribute a lot of things that fans don't see, a lot of story meetings, a lot of collaborations, a lot of coordinating with like the stats team or the social team or the producers for content and the producer for live broadcast. It will be a handful of the entire team that carries a lot of that burden. And one of the ways that both sjokz and I would kind of, let's say, guarantee, or let's say stack the deck in our favor, that we try to ensure that we do get spots, is we do a lot of that extra work.
Right.
And then couple that with the fact that we're happy to do different roles, Ifya's happy to do your stage hosting, to do analyst desk hosting, to do your interviews, no matter where the fuck they are. So you've got one person that can do 2, 3, 4 different roles over the course of multiple weeks, and they're a good collaborator off air. Similarly for me, I was very good in multiple different roles. I showed a lot of experience in a lot of places. So for me, it was I never looked at it and went, I have to be on the analyst desk or I have to cast the world final. I was like, just put me on the show. If you go to the 2015 World Finals in Berlin, I had worked multiple stages up to that point. I had cast one of the semifinals in Belgium. And because I had done so much work, they let me hold the medals so that Mark Merrill and Brandon Beck could take the medals out of the box that I held. I look back at that and I go, that's a shit day at work, because fuck me, I didn't get to say a word on broadcast, but I was still there.
True.
I was still on that show. So I got to do the final. I had a good streak of them. So yeah, like I said, we put the work in, and the politics behind it was so tough. So tough.
By the way, one detail you bring up there, because one thing I like to do in interviews with broadcast people is throw a few pearls out there. Maybe someone listens and it connects, and then they go, oh, that is something I could do, and that's how I could get in. Here's a detail that might blow people's minds. People have this really silly idea about both players and talent, that like once you're really good, you're just good. Like even with me, by the way, people go, you have an amazing memory. I do. Like I am the Quizlet Haderach of thinking. But even then, I do a million interviews where I go down there and I do it so often, it refreshes all the neurons and all the connections, and I would lose it if I did nothing. I went over 10 years ago, but I wouldn't remember a lot of the details. I'd have the big overview. So similarly, right, people won't get this because I've met so many talent, world-class talent, top of their fields, who are just doing stuff like they're just going to wing it on the broadcast, or they've got like work. 3 words, right? I can tell you to this day, sjokz is not trolling. She does more notes. She does the Deficio thing, mate. She does too many notes. She'll research all the teams, and I'll be like, you're never even going to get to it. In Counter-Strike, when she wanted to do the majors, she was asking me stuff. I was like, you're never going to get to that. Why are you even asking me about that detail? Like, that's actually, but she needed to know, like, for herself, and she needed to know, and so I'll say you're saying it's not just on camera. There's an aspect off camera that people are doing here that's elevating the whole broadcast, right?
Can I give you my biggest trick? And actually, I've never told this story outside of the broadcast talent that I speak to. Now, this is not groundbreaking. I'm not going to be claiming to have invented anything like this, right? But part of the reason that I have such great synergy with so many people that I work with, and it is kind of something that I cultivated. It's an image. It is a brand thing. If you search Reddit threads and you search discussions around my professional performance, this is one of the most common things. It's like how comfortable I am, how great I'm enabling. I get on broadcast and I take a piece of A4 paper. Now, I prep this beforehand, right? But the very first time, I know that you're a fan of Trouble and her analysis and her personality. Yeah. I am too. I think she's got a very unique perspective in League of Legends. She is not a cookie cutter analyst, and that's why I liked working with her. But that also means she has to be more deliberate with how she shares things, because when you go against the grain of your average analysts, it's a little bit more work, and then you couple that with a female voice, there's more challenges, right? So I have that conversation with her. This is one we've said multiple times. I have that conversation with anybody when I was new, when I was beginning to become moderately experienced, and then when I was the most experienced. Where are our strengths? What are our differences? We discuss them. And then I write down on a piece of paper, okay, well, how about this? Analysis plus minus, energy plus minus, tone plus minus, if it was with Monty, condescending plus minus. Okay. If it was with Thorin, it would be flame plus minus. And what I would do is this, and then for me, it's energy, ADHD, pace. I find keywords, we discuss what the flow is, we discuss where our strengths, we discuss where there's risks or things like that, and we write down story points. Maybe there's a player story, maybe there's a stat, maybe there's something that we've prepared that one of us needs to queue up. And while we're on broadcast, I will point at these things and I'll be like, all right, Thorin, you're being a bit of a dick, so I'm going to go flame minus, point it. And you don't have to take that. You don't have to acknowledge, but it's an instant way to go, hey, your co-caster has this thought or this feeling, and then you can decide how you adjust.
Right.
And you then decide, okay, well, do I acknowledge it? Oh, yeah. I mean, Trev, you are a bit right. I have been a bit intense these last few minutes. All of a sudden, every single viewer that felt the way I felt now feels heard. You've won them over.
Right.
Every broadcast I ever did. It's a tangible thing. I personally haven't seen it done a lot.
No, but I can tell you that's very unique. Most broadcasts actually just no feedback. You just do it and you just all and maybe Machine would just have the ones for stop talking now, pass it to me. He'd have some answer, but there's no feedback like that. There's no sort of setting it up. Yeah.
So I do that, and that's something that I did that from as early as 2014.
Oh wow, right.
And part of it came from I need to learn, I need to absorb from other people, but also I don't want to look bad. So if I'm on show and I think you're fucking me, I want to be able to go fix. It comes from a sense of control. But it's one of these things. It's hey, I go back to the original question a little bit. How did I make it onto international shows? Well, because I had techniques. I did things that would steer content direction. I also want to make it clear. Trust me when I say not every decision I made is good. Not every time I'm hey, flame less. And people are that was shit. Why were you fucking why were you tickling their balls? They were the worst I've ever seen. Oh, okay, fuck. But the main thing is it's with deliberate, right? I can learn if I pick a decision, I can see what the consequences are because I'm conscious of it, I'm deliberate about it, and you focus on the craft of it.
One thing I want to stress here, so let me just emphasize it with this question, is if you notice so far, this just sounds like you lived a charmed life, mate. You just walk through one door, you meet this person, go to this. It's you're almost playing one of those old on the rails, fucking point and click adventure games. You get this item, you go there, you go in the next room. But I want to emphasize this detail, Trevor. It isn't just luck, right? Because as you said, I actually agree with what you said earlier. If one of these, if you'd have taken the wrong turn, zigged when you should have zagged on one of those, the way you were doing it and how much you were grinding and how hard you wanted to make it and how you were thinking about your brand, another opportunity would have come and you would have grabbed that, right? It does look very, very lucky, but I also could have seen another way. Maybe there's another way you'd be on different broadcasts or something, right?
Dude, I still don't even know how to properly frame this because I mentioned it, but the last year I've spent a lot of time doing therapy and some self-reflection and looking to my future. I was in a very fortunate place in 2024 that I could take time just to look at me and focus on me and unpack things. I think I have been incredibly lucky. I think I have been what are the fucking chances that I get yelled at by my boss because of League of Legends and the CEO of Freaks for You's girlfriend happens to be in the room? Seriously, that you can't script that. But then when I take that business lunch and I think back to how the conversation played out and I think back to the years of watching esports content that I'm speaking to my very first legitimate esports industry CEO, tournament organizer, brand owner, broadcast organizer, and I can hold court at 24 years old, right? That happens because of the time and the effort and the focus and just the fact that I lived and breathed it, I watched so many things that I knew about it. So I am very fortunate that certain opportunities happened. But when I think about my broadcasting things, I earned those gigs, you know, and I know that I earned them because it came through hard work. It came through looking at things. I do not envy anybody listening to this, watching this, or trying to make it in the industry today, because it is a very different landscape. It is so much harder because of so many more reasons. And when I got involved, like in Europe professionally, 2011, 12, 13, even then it was easy. And because there was just the right amount of investment, there was just the right amount of interest, but it wasn't so big that it was hard. It wasn't so small that I was insignificant. So, you know, right sort of timing, but Jesus Christ, it's so much harder now. And there's so many more challenges to overcome, and it's much harder to get noticed as well, specifically if you want to be on broadcast.
They say no man is an island. We all need people who've got our back. And supporting me and the content on my channel are the following people: Matt Pugnaccio Racula, The Concept, Animosity, Bane Diesel, Ben Glass, Jason, Jensen Gore, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it, always a special thanks goes up to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where I talk about whatever topics are on your mind? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are, or maybe even to suggest a guest or a topic for my content? If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? In the Patreon link in the description box below.